Part 2, Improving Your Interpersonal Communication. In this part, we will recognize the 6 levels of listening, sharpen your listening skills, and understand the importance of listening more than you speak. Take your listening skills to the next level with 3 advanced listening techniques: paraphrasing, mirroring, and summarizing. Nurture your natural curiosity to make it your business communication superpower. Master the fine art of asking questions to extract the information and insight you need. Clarify your understanding, steer conversations, and buy time to formulate more thoughtful responses. And finally, we will make your business conversations more meaningful and productive by practicing reciprocity and self-disclosure and finding ways to create mutual meaning. Chapter 5. Listening more than you speak. In this chapter, we'll be distinguishing listening from hearing, prioritizing understanding over being understood, focusing on keeping your ears open and your mouth closed, mastering techniques for becoming a better listener. Business communication typically focuses on crafting and delivering messages and presentations that have the desired effect on an audience. The focus is rarely on listening, even though listening accounts for a significant portion of every interaction. If you're engaged entirely in speaking or presenting a message without devoting at least a portion of your time to listening, you're missing a golden opportunity to learn from your audience and tailor your message to improve the audience's receptivity and understanding. Even if your goal is to persuade others, listening to them first provides you with information and insight you need to achieve your goal. Think about it. If you don't know what your audience is thinking, you can't possibly address any questions, concerns, or rebuttals they may have regarding your message. You even run an increased risk of saying something that makes them reject what you are saying or negatively impacts what they think of you. Imagine planning for a battle without giving any consideration to your enemy's forces, weapons, battlefield positions, or possible countermaneuvers. With some luck and overwhelming force, you could still win, but you'd probably encounter some nasty surprises. For the same reasons, listening before speaking provides you with the intelligence you need to tailor your communications to your audience for the best chance of success. In this chapter, I take the spotlight off crafting and delivering messages and shine it on the importance of listening and understanding. Here you discover why listening skills are so valuable, how to prioritize listening over speaking, and how to sharpen your listening skills. The skills you developed in this chapter are sure to make you a much more effective communicator in the workplace and beyond. Effective communicators are naturally curious and are skilled listeners. They want to know what their audience is thinking before they open their mouths to speak, before they craft a presentation, and before they send any email or text messages. You can become a more effective communicator by prioritizing listening and developing your listening skills. In this chapter, I explain how. Why don't schools offer listening courses? Something that has always baffled me about business schools is that they rarely, if ever, offer or require a course devoted specifically to helping students develop their listening skills. Considering the fact that listening is one of the most critical skills in business, not to mention a major factor in personal success, the lack of attention it is given in education is shocking. The purpose of this chapter is to give you what a course in listening would entail, boiled down to a dozen or so pages. This topic alone could consume an entire book. Let's start with recognizing the difference between hearing and listening. If you're like me, when you were growing up, you probably heard a parent, guardian, or teacher say to you, "You're not listening to me." To which I would often reply, "I heard you." Hearing, however, is not the same as listening, which also implies understanding. In my case, the point that the adults in the room were trying to get across to me was that I wasn't receptive to what they were telling me, and that I wasn't processing it mentally in a way that demonstrated we had reached a mutual understanding. The differences between hearing and listening are significant. In this session, I highlighted the differences and explain what really needs to happen cognitively for listening to occur. Moving from mechanical to cognitive processes. The difference between hearing and listening boils down to the difference between a mostly mechanical and a mostly cognitive process. Hearing has more to do with the physical, mechanical process that happens in the outer, middle, and inner ear. Listening has more to do with cognitive processes that occur between the ears and in the brain. Throughout the day, your ear registers all the sounds that reach it, but your brain screens out and ignores most of that auditory data so that it can focus on what's important. In the simplest terms possible, hearing occurs when sounds are perceived through an auditory organ, such as the ear. Please look at figure 5.1 here. The outer ear acts as a megaphone, directing sound waves to the eardrum and causing it to vibrate. Those vibrations pass through the middle ear to the inner ear, where tiny hair cells inside the cochlea pick up the vibrations and transfer them to the auditory nerve. The signals then travel along the auditory nerve to the brainstem and onto the temporal lobe, where the sound is recorded. That process is hearing. Listening, however, is the process of extracting meaning from those electrical impulses. Please look at figure 5.2 here. Initially, the brain records those electrical impulses in the temporal lobe, but doesn't assign them meaning until they reach the frontal lobe. In other words, you can hear what someone is saying without fully understanding it. You've probably experienced this yourself if someone has ever tried to talk to you while you were concentrating intensely on something else. For example, if you were busy weaving through rush hour traffic on a 6-lane highway, your bestie was asking you for a relationship advice. You heard the words, but they may not have registered in your brain. Remember, if someone tells you, "You may be hearing me, but you sure aren't listening," they may well be correct. Hearing is only a physical process. Listening is a physical and mental process. For example, if you're distracted, you may hear what somebody is telling you just fine, but you're not processing it effectively. It's not registering, and in some instances, this process doesn't happen at all. In fact, some people, most children and older adults, have a condition called auditory processing disorder, APD. A person with auditory processing disorder has healthy auditory anatomy, but their brain doesn't process the signals it receives from the auditory nerve. The auditory process disorder isn't hearing loss. It's a process complication. It's a processing complication. Processing thought to develop a full understanding. Mental processing often goes beyond converting an audio signal into a thought. It includes synthesizing thoughts and experiences to make sense of the new thoughts in the entire body of knowledge and understanding stored in the brain. For example, when my mom would tell me, if you don't finish your homework now, you won't have enough daylight later to play basketball with the neighbors. I heard her, but I didn't listen to or process what she said. I'd reply, "Yeah, Mom, I heard you." She'd say, "You say you heard me, but you're not listening." And I'd say, tauntingly, "I did listen. You said that if I don't finish my homework now, I won't have enough daylight later to play basketball with the neighbors. So yeah, I heard you, Mom." I heard my mom. I could even repeat her words back to her. What happened, though, is that I had stored what my mom said in my short-term memory. The words were in my temporal lobe, but didn't progress to my prefrontal cortex, where my brain would analyze them and understand the reasoning my mom was trying to impart. My annoyance with my mom probably played a role in my resistance to processing what she was telling me. She didn't realize that I didn't realize that my mom actually had my back. She wanted me. She wanted me to be able to play basketball with the neighbors. It didn't occur to me until the sun went down and there wasn't enough daylight left to play outside that she wasn't being mean or nagging. She was trying to help me plan more effectively so that I could finish my homework and play basketball. Sorry, Mom. I know now that you were right. I didn't always listen. Listening is actually a three-stage process. Let's see figure 5.3 here. The first stage is the physical act of hearing the words. And the second stage is translation of the audio or visual. If communicating with American Sign Language signals into words and thoughts. Processing the words and phrases into meaning, context, and action. Most people are pretty effective at hearing in the first two stages because those require little effort. The third stage, however, requires paying attention, and putting forth some intentional cognitive effort. This three-stage process is why ongoing dialogue is important to ensure that everyone involved in the communication session has a mutual understanding. People need to check in with one another to verify that their thoughts and mental concepts are closely aligned to address any understandings that are out of alignment. Please see the later session summarizing to check your understanding for details. Remember, checking for mutual understanding during and after an interaction is one of the most crucial and most frequently overlooked steps in business communication and in personal communication as well. Recognizing the 6 levels of listening. People listen at different levels of attentiveness and cognitive engagement. Various experts in communication have proposed various levels of listening. Here I offer a comprehensive list of 6 levels of listening. Level 1. Ignoring. No attention is paid at all. The person may be preoccupied with their own thoughts or distracted by something externally, causing them to effectively tune out the speaker. Next, pretend listening. The person gives the appearance of listening without being fully engaged. For example, you may maintain eye contact and nod occasionally in agreement, but your mind is somewhere else. Selective listening. The listener pays attention only to certain parts of what the speaker is saying, typically focusing only on information that interests them or aligns with their preconceived notions. Attentive listening. Attentive listeners engage with the speaker, ask questions for clarification, and make a genuine effort to understand what they are being told. And empathic listening. The listener not only makes a conscious effort to understand the meaning of what the speaker is saying, but also tunes into their feelings and perspective. Empathic listeners strive to understand the speaker on a deeper level and create a supportive environment for open communication. And the highest level of listening is generative listening. At this level, the listener is involved in co-creating new possibilities and insights. Generative listening involves keeping an open mind, suspending judgment, and exploring innovative solutions and ideas that emerge from the dialogue. This level of listening often leads to transformative change, decisive action, and deep collaboration. Whenever you are in the role of listener, be mindful of how actively engaged you are on a cognitive level. If you're not at the attentive listening stage or higher, you need to tune in. If you're distracted or simply not interested at the moment, consider rescheduling if possible. If you're not doing yourself or anyone or anyone else any favors by ignoring them, pretending to listen, or paying attention to only what you want to hear. Understanding before responding or reacting. One of the biggest mistakes people make when communicating in the business world is responding or reacting impulsively to something they misunderstand or don't fully understand. You may have had situations in which you wish you hadn't sent a certain email or text message, or you posted something on social media that you later regretted when you had a better understanding. To avoid these uncomfortable situations, take the advice of Stephen Covey, author of The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Seek first to understand, and then to be understood. Specifically, adopt the following best practices. First, give the other person your undivided attention. Listen to understand without thinking about how you're going to respond to what they are saying. Stay in the moment. Give the other person the benefit of the doubt. In other words, assume the best about the person and their situation instead of assuming the worst. Assume they had good reason to say or do what they said or did, at least until you have a fuller understanding of their situation and motives. Don't interrupt. Let the other person speak freely until they've completed whatever they have to say. Fighting the temptation to interrupt can be difficult when you believe that the other person is presenting false or misleading information or is monopolizing the conversation. Try your best to be patient. In many cases, you can learn a great deal from listening that empowers you to respond more effectively. Listen without judgment. Set aside any preconceived ideas, biases, or judgments about the speaker and what they are saying. Keep an open mind and remain curious. Empathize. Try to put yourself in the speaker's shoes. Consider what you would think and how you would feel if you were in the speaker's position or had the speaker's experience. Ask clarifying questions. Demonstrate a genuine interest in understanding the speaker by asking questions about anything that's unclear. Ask open-ended questions, as opposed to yes or no questions, to encourage the speaker to share information and insights you may not even think to ask about. Lastly, check your understanding. Summarize your understanding of what you've been told to give the speaker the opportunity to correct any misunderstanding and fill any gaps in your understanding. See the later section, summarizing to check your understanding for additional guidance. Listening more than you speak or think. In Lin-Manuel Miranda's Hamilton, Alexander Burr, portrayed by Leslie Odom Jr., sings these sardonic lines. Talk less, smile more. Don't let them know what you are against or what you are for. Though these lines are the quintessential essence of politics and straddling the um, proverbial fence, they deliver sage advice about talking less and keeping your thoughts to yourself, at least until you fully understand what others are thinking and feeling. When you were growing up, you probably received similar advice from your parents, teachers, or other authority figures who may not have cared much for what you had to say. You've probably heard that you have two ears and one mouth for a reason, so you should listen twice as much as you talked. Or you may have been told, better to remain silent and appear stupid than to open your mouth and remove all doubts. Rude? Maybe, but also accurate in many situations. I don't agree with the homespun wisdom about the benefits of keeping one's mouth shut, but listening more than you speak does have its benefits, as I'm about to explain. Stop planning what you are going to say next. If you're thinking about what you're going to say in response to what you are hearing, you aren't listening at a high level. At worst, you are totally ignoring the other person. At best, you're listening selectively to pick out the information you plan to respond to. Either way, you'll never reach the mutual understanding needed to have a productive discussion. Remember, multitasking is a myth. The human brain isn't geared for it. If you try to multitask, you end up shifting your attention back and forth from one task to the other. If you're thinking about what you're going to say next in a conversation, you can't possibly be fully engaged in listening and processing what you're hearing. If you're thinking about what to say when the other person is speaking, you miss out on some of what they are saying. So the tip here is, if you're listening to someone and think of something you want to be sure to remember to say, write a note immediately, and then refocus on listening. Sometimes the fear of forgetting the thought drives a person to start crafting their response instead of listening. Eliminate this fear. Temptation by Eliminate this fear and temptation by writing a brief note. A single word or even a symbol is often a sufficient reminder of what you want to contribute to the conversation. Finding power in silence and strength in waiting. Silence is a powerful tool in communication. Whether you are speaking, presenting, or negotiating, a pregnant pause can send a powerful message and increase the impact of what you're about to say or have already said. Silence can be equally powerful, if not more so, when you're listening. When you pause to listen, people tend to feel compelled to fill that void. Silence benefits you and others involved in the conversation in at least two ways. First, silence gives you time and space to receive and process information. Second, pausing gives others the time and space to formulate their own thoughts and express them more clearly. The tip here is, when you want someone to arrive at their own conclusion about something they proposed or a question they asked that you are pretty sure they know the answer to, You know the answer too. Wait in silence. People often need to talk and reason out a problem in their own minds to arrive at a solution. And if you don't come up with the answer on their own, if they don't come up with the answer on their own, that pause in the conversation may give you all the time you need to come up with the perfect solution. This technique is especially effective in sales. When a prospective customer concludes on their own that you are selling is the perfect solution for their needs, they feel much more confident in their purchase decision. However, waiting requires considerable patience and confidence, so be prepared to put forth some effort. For example, when I used to teach undergraduate business communication courses and wanted to engage the class in discussion and not lecture for the entire period, I would pose questions to the students. Sometimes I would get immediate engagement. Other times I was met with blank stares and silence. These moments of silence could become quite long and uncomfortable, but I would continue to wait and wait and wait. I only had to do this a couple of times. My students quickly picked up on the fact that if they didn't contribute to the discussion, they faced a long and boring class. Step up to more advanced listening techniques. You've mastered basic listening skills. You give people your undivided attention, engage your mind in trying to understand what they're telling you, put yourself in their shoes to understand how they feel, ask questions to extract additional information and gain insight. What more can you do to improve your listening skills? In this session, I answer that question as I bring you up to speed on a few advanced listening techniques. Paraphrasing. Paraphrasing. Paraphrasing involves repeating what the speaker said in your own words to demonstrate your understanding. Paraphrasing is not repeating something back word for word, that's parroting. The idea of paraphrasing is that you demonstrate not only that you listened, but that you also processed what was being said enough to come to a conclusion or to ask a thoughtful question. Paraphrasing allows a conversation to advance with mutual understanding. See summarizing to check your understanding later in this chapter for phrases to help you better paraphrase what you've listened to in conversations. The warning is don't paraphrase after every sentence, only at the end of a major train of thought. Mirroring without being a copycat. Mirroring is a technique that involves reflecting back the speaker's actions or emotions. It's a way of physically demonstrating empathy and establishing a bond with the other person. Suppose you're feeling a little down when you visit a friend. Your friend is over the moon about something that recently happened in their life and can't contain their energy when they share it with you. If you're truly listening at an empathic level, your mood starts to improve. Your situation and feelings become less about you and more about your friend, and you start to mirror their emotions. That's a positive example of mirroring in practice. Forcing emotions or copying the other person in a mocking way is an example of bad mirroring. When someone leans into a conversation, you lean in. When the other person becomes animated, you become animated. When they gesture widely, you start waving your arms. If you're trying to mirror and you start to feel like you are focusing more on mirroring than you are on listening, or if you're feeling like a copycat, then you're probably doing it wrong and you'd be better off not doing it. Remember, mirroring can be an effective technique when it comes naturally, but if it's forced, it can do more harm than good. Parroting is for the birds. A friend of mine has an African grey parrot. This bird is 18 years old and has developed quite an extensive and colorful vocabulary. Really, think of all the things you've said and done at home over the past 18 years and try not to laugh at the thought of a parrot witnessing it all. Witnessing it all. And like any parrot you see characterized on television, in media, and especially in cartoons, it is in fact a parrot. It repeats what it hears, and the owner has little to no control over what it says or when, usually at the most inopportune, inopportune times, in the most inappropriate contexts. Though this bird may have some personality and impressive diction, the way it learns and communicates should not be a strategy for you as a human, especially in a business setting. Don't merely repeat back to others what they say. Paraphrase, don't parrot. Summarizing to check your understanding. In any communicative exchange, participants run the risk of interpretation dissonance, which is a fancy term for misunderstanding. The meaning the speaker intended to convey differs from the meaning the listeners interpreted. I'm not sure that misunderstandings can be ever eliminated completely. After all, no two people have the exact same life experiences, perspectives, or behaviors, but you can reduce interpretation dissonance significantly as a listener by checking with the speaker to determine whether your misunderstanding is aligned with their intended meaning, that you are on the same page. Remember, whenever you are engaged in a conversation as a listener, check in periodically with the speaker. Don't wait till the end of the conversation to ensure mutual understanding. Here are some phrases you can use to introduce your summarization. Before we move on to the next topic, I want to confirm that we are on the same page. Let me summarize what we just discussed to make sure I'm capturing all the relevant points. I want to make sure we are aligned before we move to the next stage of this conversation. Of everything we just discussed, I would love to know what you feel is the most important first step. Having these check-ins ensures that you are listening actively throughout the conversation and enables you to leave the conversation confident that you've achieved a mutual understanding. Here are some tips. At the end of any conversation, make sure all parties involved are crystal clear on any next steps. Better yet, document what those next steps are by writing down answers to the following questions. What's the goal or deliverable? What's our deadline for meeting that goal? What are the measurable objectives we need to achieve to meet our goal? What's the plan? Who's in charge? What are each person's responsibilities? When will we meet next? Don't assume that everyone understands the plan and their role in executing it. Document the plan and make it explicit so that everyone has a crystal clear understanding of what they need to do and when they need to have it done. I've seen many meetings end with assumptions that lead to significant losses of time and money due to a lack of follow-through. Remember, even when you do your best to listen, miscommunication can occur if you don't confirm mutual understanding. End of chapter 5.